Bismillah, alhamdulillah, thumma salatu wassalam ala man la nabiyya ba'dah, Muhammad ladillah, salawatu rabbina wassalamu alayhi wa ba'd. Some weeks ago, I listened to a short clip by Dr. Omar Johnson, um, an activist in the United States, given the reason he left Islam. I think it was a viral clip whereby he said he left Islam because in the masajid, what is being taught is Arab culture. Black problems are ignored. Black culture is ignored, and then people are being taught to eat, dress, and then eat, dress, wear clothes like Arabs. Because this sort of has a bit of relationship with something I talked about some days ago. Although in the Yoruba language, right? That is why I want to do this short clip to address Omar Johnson's particular clip. Actually, there were reactions from other brothers. I think I saw the one by Sajid Lifam. So I just wanted to cover certain areas. So I checked when Dr. Omar said that he now practices African spirituality. I wanted to be sure what African spirituality is he talking about. And then I saw his account on X, Twitter, and it was he had the name Omar Ifatunde. So it's clear that what is now the type of African, because Africa is a very big place. You have people with diverse cultures, diverse religion. So the Ifatunde sort of pins it down to the Yoruba religion. So I decided to also do this short clip to address this. Number one, it doesn't make sense. The logic doesn't make sense. If you take the premise Islam is true, right? That Islam is true. If this is agreed upon, as Omar Johnson once also admitted while he was Muslim, and then you take the premise that he is using as his argument that, okay, let us assume it's not true. This premise, which is going to be what I'll address further on, that Islam imposes Arab culture, right? Does the fact that Islam is true and then the imposition of Arab culture, what makes that a contradiction? What makes that an undercutting defeater for the premise Islam is true? So it says Islam is true. Islam imposes Arab culture. Ergo, Islam is not true. It doesn't make sense, right? And then you can flip this on its head and say, okay, African spirituality is the truth. That is the reality of Omar Johnson now, right? Or that is my interpretation of his reality. He is now a worshipper, right, of the way of the traditional African worship, right? So let's say, let's look at this. That African spirituality is true, but you are going to need the Yoruba language to worship in African spirituality. In the same way that you have said that because Islam imposes Arabic, that false premise, right? In the same way, this also is a problem. If African spirituality needs you to learn Yoruba, then it means also that African spirituality is false, right? So this is the very first thing I want us to discuss. Of course, you can't deny this. The Odufa, the Esefa, there is the verses, the verses with which the Ifa, which is for non-Yorubas, right? That is the Yoruba god of divination, or the system of divination as practiced by the Yorubas. So if this imposes Yoruba on you, because you won't read them in English, right? You still have to read these things in Yoruba, right? So it means that, okay, so why should we adopt your position universally? I am a Yoruba man, right? But I'm just sort of giving an opposite of your argument, right? So why should Arabs, why should white folks, why should people from the West, why should Asians, why should Chinese, why should Pakistanis, why should Indians, why should they adopt African spirituality? What does that do? So you see, this is at times people do not think critically about these positions they adopt and about the arguments to defend the positions that they've adopted, right? So that is number one. Number two, does Islam impose Arab culture on us? It is false. He said that, and let me go to his words again, before going to the ignore black people stuff. He said, we are being taught to eat and dress and eat, dress and whatsoever like Arabs. This is false. This is false. Basically, what we have as a rule in Islam, this is we call it al-qawaidu al-fiqhiyya al-kubra, the 5 major maxims with which Islamic jurisprudence is built. And then usually the last one is al-adatu muhakkama. Al-adatu muhakkama. As Sa'idi mentions in his poem, وَالْأَصْلُ فِي عَادَتِنَا إِبَاحَةً, that is basically our culture, our way of life is part and parcel of our Islam. In as much as it does not violate all the principles Islam has laid down about monotheism, if it does not violate categorical verses of Quran that prohibits unethical practices, then our culture is a valid. It's not just. It's accepted. Al-adatu muhakkama. We make reference to it. Like if there's a particular culture in Yoruba land about marriage, for instance, and then I want to get married to somebody who's also Yoruba, then I should take into consideration my culture as a Yoruba man and see it binding on myself in as much as it does not violate any precepts of Islam. Right? So is wrong, as I've shown in the first argument, is wrong here. Of course, a lot of new Muslims, when they become Muslims, they won't dress like the Arabs. They wear a thobe, turban, and stuff like that, because the Prophet ﷺ wore them. Of course, when I started also practicing, I had a turban, I had a thobe, and stuff like that. But this is not compulsory. It is usually our shallow interpretations of these things. All the actions of the actions of the Prophet ﷺ is discussed indeed, and that is why a lot of people who have these ideas have a very, very shallow understanding of Islam. The actions of the Prophet are not in themselves compulsory. It is only when his actions are an interpretation of a particular instruction that they become binding, like Salah, for instance. So we have to pray the way he prays because, of course, we're instructed to pray the way he has prayed. He's come to teach us our religion, and there's no Arabism in that. Right? And then the way you dress, in fact, it is prohibited for you to wear clothing that will single you out from your particular culture. Right? Clothing, what we call scholars call it libasu shuhra. Don't wear clothing that will make, and of course, you see the way I'm dressed, right? So, like a typical Yoruba man, right? So, don't wear clothing that will single you out of your culture. Libasu shuhra it's not even accepted. So, nobody has to. Maybe you mixed with the wrong crowd, right? Nobody will teach you to eat like Arabs. Nobody will teach you to dress like Arabs. Nobody will teach you to. But of course, when it comes to acts of worship, of course, as I said, if you're Yoruba religion, you have to learn Yoruba if you really actually want to practice it properly. When you want to offer sacrifices to Shangu and Ogun and the likes, right? Your sacrifices will not be given in Arabic or in English. And also, from a more logical angle, would say, look, for instance, we believe in a creator that is maximally great and has a will. At least Yorubas also share this belief with us. In fact, the Yoruba religion, as I mentioned in the Yoruba clip earlier, is more, the Yoruba conception of God is more like a deistic God who just created the world and left it for the control of the Orishas. But we're not focusing on that today. So, a lot of these arguments are very shallow. They do not address the very important issues that are supposed to be addressed. What is the status of the Orishas from an ontological perspective, from a metaphysical perspective, philosophical perspective? How do the Orishas stand in relation to the Creator? So to say that Arab culture is being imposed on us is just false. That's point number 2. Point number 3. So if, I checked and then it said that approximately we have 100 million adherents of people who are worshipping, who have adopted African spiritualism, offshoots like of Yoruba religion like Santeria and all this, like 100 million. So let us say, for instance, that okay, it's 100 million, and then they are on the right path. So basically, that is about 1.2% of humanity. So the remaining billions of people, right, should be on the Yoruba religion. How reasonable is that argument? So that's point number, whatever the point. Anyway, the last point is this. Truth is a truth. Truth does not vary because an Arab says it, because a white man says it, because an Indian says it. If the person is brown, and right, and if the person is white, blonde hair, blue eyes, and this person is uttering truth, it is compulsory on me to accept it. Al-haqqu la ya'rifu al-irq wala al-qabila wala al-dawla wala the truth does not in any way or sense it follow a particular tribe, right, or a particular color. And this is the problem with a lot of these black liberation movements, right, whereby they only want to impose a form of black racism in the place of white racism. We are talking about people who are not really different from white supremacists, right? Humanity is one. And our perception of the truth, it's the laws of logic are universal. They are not tied to a particular race. The law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded middle, they apply irrespective of your race, irrespective of your tribe. This is the reality. So you ask yourself, our fathers in Africa, perhaps Omar Johnson does not know this, that Islam has been a long time in Yoruba land. Our fathers in Africa who became Muslims, were they stupid? Did they feel that this is Arab culture? No. They realized that Islam was a religion of culture, a religion of a development at that time. Yorubas had no written literature. I mean, it was an oral culture. And then the Arabs came and then they gave us Islam came because you don't even have Arabs coming to preach Islam in Yoruba land. It was indigenous Africans who came to preach Yorubas. People from Mali, the old Songhai Empire, people and the Amazigh, Barbars. We didn't have Arabs come down. It's a universal religion that is not tied to a particular race or a particular group of people. Now, basically, what faults the Yoruba religion is this conception of a deistic religion that is so far, a deity that is so far that I need to approach Ogun, Shango, Obatala to offer them sacrifices, to worship them so that I will get favors from that deity that is so far, right? And it's basically false. If the Orishas, right, are not strong enough or they themselves are created, but this is Yoruba theology. Olodumare created the Orishas themselves. In fact, there's a particular SFR whereby the Orishas rebelled against Olodumare and he defeated them. So why should I worship these lesser gods, right? The Shango, Batala, and the likes, and leave the one who created them, who created the heavens and the earth? And this is exactly the Quranic argument to the Mushrikun of Makkah. This is the argument. The mushrik of Makkah. And then you see the similarity between the Meccan paganism and then Yoruba paganism. The mushrik of Makkah also believed that there's a central deity who created the heavens and the earth, just like Yorubas. But they needed their Hubal, their Allat, and so on and so forth. We worship them so that they bring us closer to this deity so far away. And then that's where we are told several times in the Quran that Allah is not far. So we do not need intermediaries for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Dr. Umar did not see this point and just became a kafir, and that's not an insult anyway. So if he became a kafir and did not bring up this argument, we will not be responding to him. Particularly with the resurgence of interest in Yoruba religion. That is the reason we reject it as Muslims and as Yorubas is because it is inconsistent logically, and it's unattainable. It's not tenable theologically. May Allah guide Dr. Umar back to Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.